Before you can make amends with anyone, you need to make amends with yourself. It's pretty, you stop and you think about it. It's pretty deep right there. That's what we're going to be talking about tonight. We'll be talking about amends. And amends is built off of principle 4. We evaluate all our relationships, every last one of them, the one with yourself, the one with God, and the one with others. We offer forgiveness for those who have hurt us, and we make amends for harm we've done to others, except when to do so would harm them or others. We all know there are some people that we'll just never be able to make amends to. It's just not safe. It's happier the merciful, Matthew 5:7. Happier the peacemakers, Matthew 5:9. It's also built off of step 8, where we made a list of all persons we have harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Notice willing. I'm going to talk about that tonight. Willing to make amends to them all. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Luke 6:31. All right, amends. Amends is way more than just saying you're sorry. A lot of times we think about amends and that's all it is. You know, the main thing about amends is you have to have an attitude of forgive me as I learn to forgive, because it works both ways. And I think that sums it up pretty much. But saying I'm sorry isn't fun and it isn't easy. None of us wake up and every time we mess up, we want to say, hey, I'm sorry. I don't. I'm being honest, you know. But don't look at it as that. Instead, look at it as putting some things to rest. You know, people have hurt us in the past, and just because it's some of those people that hurt us, we're not telling them I'm sorry to give them any relief. We're telling them I'm sorry to, like I said, put it to pass so we can move forward. Because we've all done things. You know, we've all been, up until now, we've been doing a lot of work. We went through admitting we were powerless. We turned our lives and our wills over to God's care. We done a moral inventory. We started to share our sins or wrongs with other people. We admitted our shortcomings, and we started to ask God to start to remove these shortcomings from us. But whenever you get to this part, and even in the step studies, we start to working on relationships and on that side of the recovery part. And making amends is the beginning of the end of your isolation from God and others, because now you're starting to understand, yes, some of that shame and some of that guilt is starting to peel off. Whenever we get to amends, whenever we do a step study, I always write a couple of things down, because these are some of the things I've heard in the step study. And it's like, well, if God's forgiven me, that's enough. I don't have to tell him I'm sorry. Why I want to drag up the past? One guy told me telling someone I'm sorry just doesn't sound natural for me. You know, some of them people, they deserved what I did. That guy had a lot of hurt buried. You know, no one ever told me they were sorry. Why should I tell someone else they were sorry? And the famous one, I'd rather just let sleeping dogs lie. I don't want to stir up the past. But making amends is not about so much of your past as it is about your future. Before you can have the healthy relationships that you want, we need to clean up that guilt and that shame and that pain from the past relationships. Because if you don't take it, if you don't look at it that way, as clean, just getting rid of the guilt and the shame, this is what you're going to get.
You won't be disappointed, Charlie Brown. This time I have a little extra surprise as a bonus.
Now, we all know how this is going to end. But listen to him right here.
Why, oh why do I let her do this to me? Why? Maybe she's right. After all, if you can't trust your own psychiatrist, who can you trust? This time I'm really going to kick it. I'm going to kick the habit. This is the end of all my faults. And now for the surprise. Would you like to see how that looked on instant replay?
Mm-hmm.
Instant replay.
You heard while he was walking back. He's stuck in insanity right there, because he's doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. He knows he's going to end up hurt lying on his back. But he hasn't forgiven himself. Why, oh, why do I continue to do this? So you see that amends? He can't start making amends with anyone else till he makes amends with himself. Because it's not the object that he keeps falling down. or the object that he trusts towards the end, he talked himself in, I'm really going to kick this football. So he was more worried about the football than anything else. But, you know, making amends, sometimes it gives you a little bit of help.
Okay, that is the last time you were going to pull that crap. You hear me? Do you hear me? And you were going to hold down that football until Charlie Brown kicks it. You got that?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Yay!
And you know what else? I did some checking around. You're not a licensed therapist. Roadhouse.
You know, sometimes you could, now I'm not saying that's the right way to take, but I mean, sometimes you need that little help. And I'm going to be honest with you. Whenever you start to make amends, that him, that's going to come out in you. And you're going to start to realize. But instead of him focusing that anger where it belonged, took it out on Lucy. We all know Lucy's a jerk. But you know, it showed Charlie Brown right there that yes, it can be done. But like I said, I don't suggest you do it that way. But when we're doing our inventory, you know, you made a list of those you've harmed, and now it's time to be willing to make amends. And you're going to hear willing. That doesn't mean run out and make all your amends. That means willing. That's a change of heart. It's a change of posture in your heart that I'm always talking about, where all of a sudden now, maybe I can do this. So you want that willing to start. Luke 6:31, it reminds us to treat others the way that we want to be treated. And for some of us, that's very difficult because we've been treated very badly. Some of us has been abused. All the stuff that happened to us wasn't even our fault. It just happened. You know, we're just a victim of circumstances. We got caught in the crossfire, or we were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. You know, I've heard many a times also, I will never forgive them, not after what they done to me. And after we got further in the step study, I noticed that that was normally a sexual abuse at a real young age. And I know that that's something to deal with on their own. A couple of guys, it was adultery that entered their relationship with their wife. And they were like, I could just never forgive her. You know, and sins, they're deep like that and they leave painful wounds. But that's the root of dysfunction. That's the reason you got where you are right now. And we don't ever look at it like that. But I'm going to tell you something. Don't ever tell God what he cannot do. I had a pastor tell me that once. I said, I can't build furniture. And he spun me around. He said, you don't ever tell God what he can't do. And I told that to somebody. I said, don't ever tell God you ain't going to. And they ended up forgiving that person, have a relationship with that person. They share children with that person. So God can do it. But we have to also have that posture in our heart to be ready to do it. You know, forgiving a perpetrator of such wrongs, even after one harm has been dealt with, you still have that emotional pain that's going to follow you for a long time. And that seems impossible to give up. You know, you're going to have to deal with this issue in 10 or 12 different stages of your recovery, because you still have to go through forgiveness, and then you got to go through grace, and it's a lot. But the thing here is to start to seek God's help in forgiving them, as well as forgiving ourselves. We have to realize that we've also harmed others, maybe not in the same way, but we caused the same damage to them. So even though we may not have done to them what they did to us, that trauma, and I really don't like that word, but it's the only way to explain it, that trauma that we carry, we just pass that on to someone else and we put them through the same thing. So part of our principle is make amends for harm I've done to others, except when to do so would harm them others. And right here we have to listen to Matthew 23 and 24. It says, therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar and remember your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled with them, then come and offer your gift. We have to look at it this way. If you're not ready to offer your forgiveness or making amends while that person still holds something against you, sometimes we just have to leave that with God. And I know that's hard. And a lot of people say, oh, well, that's a cop-out. You're just going to leave it in God's hands. If it is not safe for me to go tell somebody, I'm sorry. It is in God's hands, you know. And sometimes we have to just leave it like that. First, we have to go to that person and see where in the relationship we are. Is there still a relationship left? If it can be repairable, if we want it repairable, if they want it repairable. I tell a lot of people and they say, I went made an amends and that's it. It's over. I said, okay, but you don't have to hang out and have barbecue on the weekends. Y'all don't have to be friends. You don't even have to have a relationship. You just did what you had to do. When the time is right, God is going to give you the power, the courage, and the wisdom to do it. But keep in mind, again, we have to be willing to consider forgiveness also when we start making these amends. I had a good brother of mine driving down the road and just so happened to run into somebody he owed an amend to. And it had been on his mind a long time. And they stopped down a dirt road, rolled the windows down, started talking. He was able to make his amends right there. It's weird how God works. Now, CR has a guide to help you make your list. But if you look on the back of those pages, I think they're on the back. But all you really need is a piece of paper with 2 columns. One with who you hurt, and the second one, who am I willing to forgive? Because they're going to go hand in hand. All of you are doing right now is just making a list and you're checking it twice. That's all you're doing. You're making a list. You're not putting times, dates. You're not writing what you need to say. All you're doing is making a list. And whenever you start on this right here, after you finish your devotional time every day, just take 30 seconds to a minute, just quiet time and just listen. And you'd be amazed. Someone will just pop on your mind. Well, I need to work on forgiveness for them. Or maybe I need to be the one. That's the best way to do it. And that way God is going to guide you. So let's look at our amends, our acrostic. Tired of looking at Peter. Admit the hurt and the harm. We just learned how important it is to open up to God and to others. And for those of you that done a inventory, that's hard to be able to open up to someone and really talk to them. All this stuff has been bottled up for a long time. It's interfered with you making new relationships. It's interfered with past relationships. And in this step, you really need to start to face the hurts, the resentments, and the wrongs that others have caused you or that you have caused others. Holding on to resentment only blocks your recovery. But it don't just do that. It also blocks God's forgiveness for you, because we've all learned if we want God to forgive us, we have to learn to forgive others. Now, it's very easy for God to forgive. It's not so easy for us to forgive. But Luke 6:37 tells us, do not judge others and God will not judge you. Do not condemn others and God will not condemn you. Forgive others and God will forgive you. We have to stop and think sometimes, who do we think we are by judging someone else? And we all have character defects. Just some people are good at hiding it than others. So whenever we're always at that point of judgment, we have to ask God to show us that same defect in our life. They say, well, man, all she does is scream at me. God, show me in my life. Do I scream like that all the time? You're going to be amazed. How much people put on you is the same thing you're going to put on others. But God will help you with that. And we always have to remember, everything passes through God's hands. So everything that has happened, God has already known about. The next letter, M, make a list. During our inventory, we made a list of the people that we need to forgive, but we also made a list of the ones that hurt us. And you see, we do that in the inventory, and whenever we get to amends, everybody in the group is like, man, y'all were sneaky on that. I said, no. I said, there's a reason, because we're trying to keep that inventory balanced. All these people hurt me. Yeah, but you hurt some people too. We have to keep the good and the bad totally balanced. So whenever the ones that you list that caused the mess that you're in right now, that's the one you have to start working on your forgiveness list. The list of people who hurt you in your inventory, the people that you hurt in your inventory, the ones you owe an amends to. The ones that we didn't mean to hurt, but we still hurt anyway. And it's kind of hard that sometimes we do things out of spite when we're in pain, whenever we're hurting, whenever others are hurting us. And it's like, I can't get to her, but I can get to him and he can get to her. So then you're looking at one situation of a problem you had with this person, and you ended up with 5 people now you have to go to and you have to meet. But God's going to reveal all them people to you as you add them to your list. Your inventory is going to be there, and it's going to be ongoing for the rest of your life. I tell people that, after a while you've been in recovery, and that's, even as psychiatrists, if you're married, they're going to bring your spouse in. Eventually, we got to bring our spouses into our recovery, because whenever our inventory needs talking or something needs to be said, we need to move away from that sponsorship and we need to move into that spouse, because we're one. Whenever we were married, God made us one. Doesn't work like that for everybody. It takes a lot of time to get that way. But we have to become that, because there's many a times I do stupid stuff and I have to call Sherry and say, you never guess what I did. And she pretty much guesses it every time, because I always do stupid things. But that inventory is going to go on forever. So whenever I do screw up, I can pick up the phone and call somebody and talk to them about it. And it's not all beat me down. They'll give me a little bit of encouragement, Luke, again, it tells us to treat others as you want to be treated, not treat them as they treat you. It's kind of how we grew up in my household. You see, that right there, that's a Jesus thing. You will want to continue your pathway to peace. So start recognizing your errors now and start handling as they pop up. Because if we handle them as we go, we keep our sanity, and then our inventory stays short. It's like we made this inventory, we move forward. Whenever something else pops up, we can add to it, but we never have to go back to the beginning and go through everything again. The E stands for encourage. We've got to encourage one another. Encouragement is something that is needed your entire life. Even when the worst thing happens to you, someone has to be able to see that, someone has to be able to show you that there's always a bright side to everything that happens. A lot of people will say, yeah, I woke up with a flat tire. And then you turn on the news that night and it was a 3-car pileup on I-49. There's a bright side to that. I got up and I ran late that one day, and it freaked me out, and I was all mad at myself because I ran late. I'm like, what's all these red lights up there? 2 people died in that wreck. So me running late and me getting mad, there was still a bright side, not to the family, but there was a reasoning behind me being late. So we can't beat ourselves up over that. Because Hebrews tells us, it says, and let us consider how we may spur one another toward love and good deeds. If you're ever asked, if someone ever comes up to you and says, hey, I really want somebody that's going to speak into my life. We hear that a lot. That's an honor right there, because I mean that person totally trusts you. That encouragement always has to come out of you. And whenever we start to do that, then what you're going to find is that person going to start speaking into your life. And now you found that person to walk with. And there's a lot of times you have your sponsor. I get it. But there's somebody else you just click with. And you tell them more than you tell your sponsor, because y'all have learned to encourage each other and constantly tell each other and walk with each other. The N stands not for them. You need to approach those to whom you are offering your forgiveness or amends. You need to do it humbly, honestly, sincerely, and willingly. We don't offer excuses or accept anything just to justify our actions. We focus on our part only, and we do not ever expect anything back. Sometimes people will listen to an amends and they'll just be like, are you finished? Yeah. All right. You're not going to hear thank you, I forgive you. That's not what we're looking for. You're responsible to make amends to the people you have harmed. It's not your responsibility for them to even accept the apology. We just got to get this off of our chest, because Jesus has told us to love your enemies and do good to them. Lend and expect nothing back. See, God loves us generously and graciously. Even when we're at our worst, God is kind. So we need to learn to be kind. You can become, whenever this part, most people done made their inventory and they think, oh, the rest is easy. But then we start looking at bitterness, and you can become addicted to the bitterness, to the hatred, to the rage. And sometimes that's harder to kick than the alcohol or the drugs or the cigarettes or the depression or the anxiety or anything. Because that anger starts to build up, and that anger can shrivel your soul up. It produces 3 Ds. I added a D though. If you hold it all inside, it's going to produce depression, despair, and discouragement. And I added another D, drama, because we all know that drama is going to outlast any depression you're going to have. That's what we need to deal with first. And we need to deal with what the problem is before we can deal with any of the side effects. An unforgiving heart is going to cause more pain and destruction than it ever will the person that hurt you. Let's move on to D. Do it at the right time. This principle not only requires courage and good judgment and willingness, but a careful sense of timing. Ecclesiastes 3:1 tells us there is a right time for everything. And if you ever read that, it sounds like that old song, turn, 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 because there's a time for this and there's a time for that. We have to understand that there is a right and a wrong time to make an amends. Making an amends in a crowded restaurant might not be the right time. Or at a family gathering, it might not be. Or like at a wedding or a funeral, that might not be a right time for us. But there is a time to let things happen. And whenever they go to happen, we just need to allow them to. We don't need to force and we don't need to make things happen. There's a right time and a wrong time to offer forgiveness or to make the amends. Before making the amends, we need to pray about this. We need to be at that point to where if that person just says, get out of my face, we're strong enough to handle the get out of my face and walk away. We also need to be at a point to where if that person breaks down in tears and hugs us and say everything's okay, are we ready to accept that? Some people aren't. You know, you go to make an amends and you just think, well, I'm going to tell them I'm sorry and that's it. And all of a sudden now they want a relationship, but you don't want that relationship with them. We have to be prepared to that also. Because our principle goes on to tell us, except when to do so would harm them or others. Philippians 2:3-4. It says, in humility, value others above yourself, not looking at your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. We don't wait until we feel like making an amends or offering a forgiveness. We have to live this principle, and this principle, it's hard to act on because we have to separate our emotions from what actually is going on. And that's not really easy to do. Making your amends is an act of obedience to Scripture, and it's also for personal survival. Holding something in for 30, 40 years can chew you up worse than having a rock in your shoe. And it's hard because it's like, I don't have a lot of relationship with my family. So it's like when people act like family to me, I'm quick to be like, what? No, because I don't have that family relationship. So until I started to make amends with my family, now I can accept people. Whenever people say you're my brother, I can accept that. So it takes a little time. S, start living the promise of recovery. When I say recovery, I don't mean just from a substance. I mean from you being you, what that substance or what that issue caused you to be. A lot of people hear recovery and they just go straight to drugs and alcohol. There's more people in Celebrate Recovery that struggle with depression and anxiety and never took a drink in their life. So when you hear that word recovery, that's not what I'm talking about. But as we continue, we're going to discover that God's gift for true freedom from our past is real. We're going to begin to find peace and serenity that we've been seeking our own lives. We're going to become ready to embrace God's purpose for our lives. Like me, whenever I was drinking, and I always said, well, man, I found that perfect place. I knew what to drink and I knew what to take. I could find that perfect high like we all chased. It wasn't that I didn't want to have control over my body. I just wanted people to shut up and leave me alone. So whenever we go back and we look at this right here, it's the same thing. We're chasing the same peace that we wanted. It's just now we found a better way of doing it where it's not going to cause destruction. By turning things over to God, we're going to start to feel that inner peace. Because God promises us that He's going to repay us for the years the locusts have eaten. Making amends, nope, serenity prayer, back up. Making amends is going to offer you freedom. It's going to offer you freedom from the chains of resentment, anger, and hurt. It's going to give you freedom. And through your amends, you're going to start to see all the harm that you caused and that you caused others. And it's going to help you deal a little bit with the stuff people did to you, because you're going to see how, man, I really was, I'm not that type of person, but I did those things. Well, you're going to see it on the other side. Amends work both ways when it comes to recovery. When we break for small group in a little bit, I'm going to encourage any of y'all that did an amends to anybody, share it with others. I don't know what the question is going to be, but if you ever made an amends with anyone, share it to someone who may never have made an amends. And they're not all pretty. Like I said, I've had people tell me, man, that dude spit at me. Yes, I have a couple of those I can't approach, but it gives us all a sense of really what to expect. So that is amends. What we'll do is we'll do the serenity prayer. We're going to take about a 10-minute break. The men will go outside. The ladies can stay in here. All right. God is serenity. The things I cannot change. The courage to change the things I can. And the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time. Enjoying one moment at a time. Accepting hardship as a pathway to peace. Taking as Jesus did the sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever and the next. Amen. We're going to take about 10 minutes.